Hello. Hi, thank you everybody for coming. I would like to introduce the gallery director, Courtney.
Good evening and welcome to the Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design. For those of you that are not familiar with RMCAD, we're a private art college founded in 1963, and we're celebrating our 50th year anniversary this year. RMCAD offers BFAs in 7 fields as well as MAs in 2 fields. So as Daniel mentioned, my name is Courtney Stell, and I'm the gallery director here at RMCAD and curator of Daniel Eatock and Empty Room, the sequel, the exhibition that will open shortly after the talk chat performance tonight. This lecture is part of RMCAD's Visiting Artist, Scholar, and Designer program. The VASD program is an interdisciplinary initiative that fosters vision, creativity, and innovation by bringing leading artists, scholars, and designers to campus. Providing direct access to contemporary culture, the program creates a cross-disciplinary environment made possible through appreciation and critical inquiry. It's my pleasure and honor to introduce for the first time Gretchen Marie Schaefer, who is the VASD program coordinator, who will introduce our 17th lecturer and our distinguished guest for the evening, Daniel Eatock. Gretchen?
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for the first installment of our lecture series, Interventions. This series will investigate the various ways interventions function in art and design discourse today, offering moments for reflection and opportunities for change. We will begin the series with tonight's lecture by Daniel Eatock, an artist and designer based in London. Daniel's notable biography includes a master's degree from the Royal College of Art. He has design experience at the prominent Walker Art Center and is celebrated for his renowned design campaign for the network TV series Big Brother. Eatock's monograph, Imprint, published by Princeton's Architectural Press, emphasizes his attention to systems, information, and archiving, as does his website, eatock.com. The artist's website also highlights Indexibit, the widely used content management system and website platform of his design. Tonight, Daniel's lecture will take the form of performance and situate us within a loop, a common concept in his work. The artist created artworks in the gallery just outside of this auditorium. His lecture will guide us through these artworks. The lecture will be recorded and then presented in the gallery as an artwork itself. And now I would like you all to join me in welcoming Daniel Eatock.
Okay, thank you, Gretchen, and thank you, Courtney. The first 5 minutes is a nightmare. Standing here, my heart's beating. So I'm going to make an intervention. I'm going to take a picture of Gretchen, and then I'm going to give Gretchen the camera, and I'm going to ask Gretchen if she would take a picture of Courtney. And then there's a lot of gaps in the seating, but the idea is that the camera will get passed from one person to the next person, each person photographing the person sitting next to them. And once the camera works its way to the back, whoever gets the camera at the end, I would like you to take my picture, and that will kind of complete the chain. It will give us a loop. So, as Gretchen said, this lecture is a performative lecture, and you might be seeing this lecture live in the auditorium, or you might be hearing these words spoken through headphones in the gallery. And if you're listening to this in the gallery, it was recorded on September the 17th, 2013, and it was recorded in the Mary Harris Auditorium, which is next to, or kind of is in between the two galleries. I am your narrator. I am Daniel Eatock. I'm the person who's made the work that's in the gallery. It's not a conventional audio guide, so what you're looking at doesn't necessarily correspond to what I'm describing or talking about. I will say or I will stutter, I will pause, I will make mistakes. Some things won't make any sense. It's unscripted, apart from a few words which I'll read. There's a few, as I run through the performance, I've put footnotes which will accompany the main pieces. And I want to go off at tangents and not only speak about the work which is in the gallery, but just kind of tell stories or jokes and things which can accompany works and maybe give an insight into a thought process. There are two footnotes here. When I first returned to my studio in London after working at the Walker Arts Centre, I was lucky enough to have some work featured in the New York Times. But in London, I couldn't buy the newspaper. So I had a friend in Minneapolis. I called them and asked them if they could get me 10 issues. And there was a miscommunication on the telephone. I said, I'm in the New York Times. Can you get me 10 issues? Okay, but why do you want 10 issues? I'm like, because I would like to give one to my mum and dad and have a pile of these newspapers. And this miscommunication happened for a few minutes, and then we both realised 10 issues and 10 issues. I didn't think that you called trainers 10 issues, so I really liked that wonderful miscommunication. And then finally it started to stop raining. I like this started to stop. And I just put that in because of my time here in Denver has rained. The guidebook said it's sunny for 360 days of each year, and after being here for 5 days, it rained for all of them. So maybe it's going to be sunny now for 1 year. So I got the first email from Courtney on the 9th of November in 2010. So from today, that is 1,043 days ago. So that's 2 years, 10 months and 8 days. And I was surprised that it was so long ago because it's gone really quickly. And we've not been working on the exhibition every day since that email, but I think it's interesting to understand the time frame that it takes to make something. Lots of the work that you'll see in the gallery has been made very quickly. Do you know, I came here, I didn't bring any work with me other than ideas, and the work has all been built on site. So there's a total of 18 works. Our conversation, when Courtney kind of sent that first email inviting or asking if I would be interested in the show, I was interested in having a conversation with her before agreeing. So we kind of started this conversation around nothing, or starting at the beginning. And I don't remember exactly how it went, but we started to talk about an empty room. So the gallery is a space where whatever you put in that space, it's a pure environment where there's nothing that will detract from that kind of the thing which has been placed. But every time I show work in a gallery context, there are always lots of things which are there. The room is never empty. So there's always light spots that are cast from the spotlights on the gallery wall. So even if the wall is empty of work, there'll be either a shadow or a spotlight. There's always like a sound of the air conditioning unit. and even like the scent of a person that's just exited the room. So this kind of idea that a space is empty is an impossibility. And that's kind of where we began this show. And throughout this audio guide, I've to accompany the 18 works which are in the galleries, I've also added pairings with works which I've made previously. And I've tried to make relationships. I think with these works all being new, it was quite daunting to stand here and talk about them. You know, some of them I've only just made, so it takes some time to really understand. But by comparing them with works I've made 1, 2, sometimes 10 years ago, it helps me kind of see, I guess, just position them or understand kind of what they might mean. So this was a work which was made, I think, in 2009, and it's titled Switch the Dark Off. There are 3 photographs taken of the gallery wall, and each photograph captures the lights, the spotlights, as it highlights the wall. And then those photographs were enlarged to actual size, then hung in exactly the same position where the photograph depicts. And you get this very strange kind of camouflage. So now we're seeing a photograph of the wall. So there's an additional layer with the documentation. But I think this relates very strongly to the kind of the bigger principle of this show. So working with the empty room. The whole screen is a footnote for myself. By this stage now, I feel a bit more comfortable because 5 minutes has gone. So I just want to make sure. Yeah, it was a bit sticky, but it was okay. I'm breathing okay. Can everybody understand me when I'm speaking? Okay. Okay. And it's true, I didn't wear any deodorant. So, in a way, I'm generating. I think at the end, I'm interested that the nerves and the tension of being here will have an effect that you can all experience afterwards. So we began by the show which was in the gallery space before my show. That was the materials that I chose to work with. So once the exhibition finished, the work was removed, but all the materials like the pedestals, the shelves, the monitors, those things remained, and they remained in exactly the same position where they were last used. So when I arrived at the gallery, it wasn't a void, it wasn't this empty space, it was a space that had a history. And I came prepared with ideas to respond to those things, and also make, on top of those I guess furniture and equipment, I wanted to raid the gallery's kind of storage spaces, and work with things like tools, materials and equipment which were already existing. So things, we didn't go out to buy things specially, those things were already here. And I was also keen to work with the gallery's archives. So looking back at the history of the gallery, so the photographic archives, the previous invitations and posters, all that material I felt was interesting to use as content from which to build new works. So, in a way, we had a conversation which for 2 years we made a show, and we were both quite happy with how the show was working. And then I suddenly felt that it was too normal. So we cancelled the show, and this idea that I'm talking about now came, it kind of changed direction. And quite quickly, I looked at all the areas that were, when making an exhibition, like the invitation, the title graphic, the documentation of the show, all those things became opportunities to make or propose artworks. So the first opportunity that presented itself was the show invitation. This had to be printed way in advance of the show. So at that moment, I had to create an artwork that could, or select an image which could work on the invitation. On the screen now, this is a previous invitation that I've made, which I think has a nice relationship to the invitation for this show. So here, this was a group show of 5 artists. Each artist from this group show had their own invitation card. Yeah, you can't see that, but no, that's okay. So each one of there are 5 invitations. So each artist had their own individual one, but then there was this composite invitation, which is the bottom left corner, which overlaps all 5 invitations. So it was a way that the individual invitations and the multiple invitations could kind of coexist. And then working for the invitation for this show, it was I explored the archive of invitations that had been made since Courtney had been the gallery director, and taking each one of these invitations and working with a graphic design, was it a recent student or current student? Sarah? A recent graduate. We formed a digital overlay of all those invitations to form this image. And that became the artwork for the invitation. The exhibition title graphic, which is outside of the door. The footnote here is, a long time ago, maybe 10 years ago, I went to my mum and dad's house for Christmas. And on the dining room table, there was a bowl of fruit. And it looked really beautiful, like a big arrangement of bananas and clementines and oranges. And then when I went into the kitchen, I found this object. This was a single clementine that contained all the stickers that had been removed from all of the other fruits. And I asked my mum what happened, and she described that she'd removed all these stickers from all the other fruits because she wanted them to be more natural. She felt that the sticker was like a brand applied to them, almost like the Lacoste crocodile on a t-shirt, and by removing it, it somehow felt more natural. So I could understand that the removal was interesting, but then to apply them to one fruit and to totally cover it, I thought was a brilliant gesture. And I think unknowingly she'd created like a perfect artwork. So I often kind of go back to this, that we've all removed these stickers from fruits, and we've either stuck them on the refrigerator door or on sketchbooks or even on our t-shirts, but to put them back onto a fruit, I think is absolutely genius. So with the title graphics, I wanted to look at this idea of removal. So when vinyl graphics are prepared, the machine cuts out the letters from a large sheet of plastic, and then all the area that surrounds those letters is removed to reveal the letters, and then the letters are then applied to the wall. But during that process, inside the letters, you get counters, which are these little areas. So, again, I invited Sarah I created the typography, and I invited Sarah, once the typography had been fixed to the gallery wall, she was then asked to apply the counters on top of that. So it becomes like a decorative or playful element on something which typically is quite dry or static. And the footnote here is, recently Flavia and I were walking through a city, and there was a shop, and the sign for the shop, it had functional decoration. And I really liked it was Flavia that spotted it, but I thought, what an amazing kind of oxymoron. How can decoration be functional? I think it's really, those two words seem kind of opposite, and I think together it's really nice, but I think it kind of connects with this. So those items are functional for the letters to exist, but by removing them and applying them, they become decorative. So it has that nice, I think it would fit well for that shop. This is a spray can that's been sprayed with its own contents. So I sprayed the spray into a fan, and the fan backdrafted the colour that was coming out back onto the can, and I rotated it around until the can was totally covered in its own contents. During the process of our dialogue making the show, I asked if Courtney could send some photographs of the equipment and the materials that belong to the gallery. So I had hundreds of photographs showing tape measures and paint cans and rollers and all that kind of the miscellaneous stuff which is necessary in order to install an art show. But when I started to look at the amount of paint that was left from previous exhibitions, I had the idea to work with that. So the work was we poured all of the paint into a large container. And then we painted a gallery wall. We didn't mix the paint, so the paintbrush was dipped into the paint, unmixed, and it was through the application to the gallery wall that the colour started to kind of mix together. Towards the end of the process, after the wall had been painted, the paint that was in the tub was almost a perfect grey, like a mid-tone grey. So that led to the kind of part 2 of this work, where we canned all of the leftover paint. The footnote here is on Heinz, who make food and soups and beans, they have their catchphrase has always been 57 varieties. Is it 50 or? Yeah, 57 varieties. So I took 57 varieties of Heinz products, and in the same way I mixed them all in a big bucket and then recanned them. So within this can there are 57 different types of Heinz foods. So there was beans, soup, different types of beans and different types of soups. And then with the paint there was enough paint to fill 18 tins. And these tins are in the gallery, and with an invitation that they're free to take. So anybody is invited to take a can of this paint on the condition that you will paint one wall in your apartment or home. You can't mix the paint beforehand. This is the instruction. The mixing must happen during the application, so you can dip the brush into the paint and then apply it to the gallery wall. And after that process has happened, then the contract, or it's an exchange, so I invite you then to submit a photograph of that painted wall, and then I will display those as a set of pictures on my website. This is the footnote is a set of shelves, 5 shelves, which were removed from a gallery's storeroom and then positioned into the gallery. Nothing supports the shelves other than the objects that they support. So there are no shelving brackets. So it's an impossible shelving unit to use. If you were to remove one of those boxes, it would collapse. In the gallery, the work was made in response to these small IKEA shelves, which are called floating shelves. Can you see that? Can you see that? Great. It was a really difficult work to photograph. I had to photograph it twice because it's a white shelf on a white wall. But I can describe it, and you can see it in about half an hour's time. So a floating shelf is a shelf which has no brackets, or the shelf conceals its brackets. So you fix the brackets onto the wall, and then the shelf slides on top of it and conceals them. Now, I have a really hard time with these shelves because I think you should see the bracket. I think the bracket is really important to understand the strength of the shelf. Do you know, if it's got a wooden bracket and they're quite delicate, you know that you can put maybe like a small potted plant. But if it's a heavy steel bracket, you know you can load the shelves with books. Where these floating shelves, you don't know, you have no idea the structural integrity of that object. So I've made a work where the bracket is revealed, and there are 3 combinations. The first combination is the correct one, so the shelf conceals both of its fixing points. The second one, the shelf is rotated, so it's only fastened on one of its fixing points, and it rests on the second. And the third, again, it's fastened by only one of its fixing points, and it just hangs. So there's a kind of 3 steps that happen. But for me, I think it feels that this, you move from a horizon to kind of a slope to a vertical. And I think there's something, it's like a three-step, I don't know, I don't want to interpret it, but I think it feels, it falls and hangs very, very, I think, beautifully on the gallery wall. This tilting, or this kind of shifting of something, is something which is reoccurring in my practice, and I've often been kind of correcting things. So I have a series where I've photographed trees which have been vandalized. So when a tree is snapped by a vandal or pushed over, then I turn the camera and then take a picture so that within the photograph the tree stands vertically, but the background is at an angle. If you're listening to this on the audio guide, it's quite complicated, and maybe all the footnotes will be complicated, but you'll be able to find this work either in the book or on my website. These are 4 spirit levels which the gallery owns, and it was again one of the photographs that I was sent when I was back in London. I think it's great that there's 4, so we have this obsession in a gallery to make sure that things are straight. So it's a lot of spirit levels for quite a small space. These are, I can't see, maybe you can see that a bit, that's a detail. But I was working with the 5 large IKEA shelves, which were existing again from the previous show, before my show. And I installed the shelves at an angle, so they would correct the angle of an object which was placed on the shelf. So this is serving tongs, which I found in the gallery's kitchen. So the shelf is positioned on the wall, so the top edge of the serving tongue is perfectly horizontal. This is a small nail. So all the objects which I'm working with are things which I've found since being here. I'll go back to the big image and see. I think you can just about make that out. So the top one is cheese, the next one is a pencil sharpener, and then a doorstop, serving tongs, and a nail. I'm going to go back and forward and break the sequence. These are existing frames which the gallery owns. Most of them are standard IKEA frames. The 2 in the middle were custom frames made to exactly the same specification as the IKEA frames, but they were custom made by a frame maker. All those frames were used in a previous exhibition. None of them were made for this show. But I made a piece where I took the inserts from the IKEA frames and then installed them in the custom-made frames. The title of the piece is Counterfeit Frames. I find it really funny that to custom make a frame, it's quite expensive to make a frame, and IKEA frames are very cheap. So to make a frame and pay quite a lot of money for it, and it looked almost identical to an IKEA frame, there's a nice, I think it's really funny. This work looks quite dry when you see it. You can't, again, it doesn't display very well on the projector. But I think it's really, really funny because what you see is a handmade frame with an IKEA insert, and you get this peculiar margin that kind of surrounds the insert. So the insert fits, but it has this extra area. And yeah, the picture you can't see, but you'll see it in the gallery. The footnote, these are clip frames, standard clip frames, which you can buy in any art supply shop or kind of framing shop. And here there are two clip frames. One was an A2 clip frame and one was an A3 clip frame. And I swapped the glass, so the A2 glass was on the A3 back and the A3 back was on the A2 glass. So just by swapping those components, it created like a new configuration or permutation for those kind of standard components. The footnote is, these are existing pedestals from a previous gallery show that I had. And I was working with them. I wanted to find the thinnest, tallest pedestal, and then the next widest, tallest, and then stack it on top. So the idea is that I would build these kind of inverse towers. So a tower which is almost hidden. So the bottom, the first pedestal is mainly hidden, and it becomes this draping. So a pedestal is designed to put an art object on top. So here the object of art is the next pedestal and the next pedestal. I think this could continue infinitely, or as many times as possible, working with existing pedestals. I think I made 3 different permutations from the existing things. And here, from the previous show, I had 5 pedestals to work from. And I was keen to kind of change the relationship. So rather than the pedestal supporting the art object, I wanted the pedestal to be the material which became the art. So here it's a broom. Again, it's blown out on the projector, but it's a broom which supports the pedestal against the gallery wall, lifting it off the ground. This pedestal is pushed away from the gallery wall, and the weight of the pedestal trying to fall back against the wall is kind of held in position by a hammer. This is a set of steps, and the pedestal fits perfectly on those steps. So the steps just elevate the pedestal by 2 steps, and again it uses the wall to support itself. And I think this is my favourite of the pedestal pieces, but it's the one which at this moment I don't really have anything to say about it, or I haven't understood this piece. I think maybe it was the last piece that was made in the installation, and it was made spontaneously, again with the materials that were to hand, but it's a tape measure that rests on the top surface of the pedestal. And I found just by playing with this tape measure that it was just possible to extend it so it would touch the ceiling. But I had to do maybe like 3 attempts, because if you kink the tape measure then it collapses. But it just about held itself in that position. And I like that when you encounter this object, you can see the distance from the top surface of the pedestal to the ceiling. It gives you that distance. But I don't know, it just makes me smile, the fragility of it. During the process of making the exhibition, Courtney said there was a space or an opportunity to make something for a magazine. I forgot the name of the magazine. 5280. And I had a small space, like the size of an advertisement. And we could have made an announcement that just advertised the show, but I wanted to use that opportunity to make a work. So this is the work. So this handwritten text is printed in that small space in I think it's the upcoming issue of this magazine. So I really like, do you know when you walk down the street and you see a poster that has like a perfect person pictured? Do you know, it might be a handsome guy or a beautiful woman advertising something, and it's all photoshopped and it looks really perfect. And then somebody takes out a chewing gum and sticks it on their nose, and it transforms that perfect person into a clone. Do you know, that one act that somebody has done with the chewing gum totally destroys that advertisement. And I think it's really powerful, that small gesture. So I wasn't sure whether the magazine would kind of let this text exist within its pages, because in a way it kind of destroys the magazine, or it gives the potential for that magazine to, it's kind of poking fun at that context. But I really like the potential that magazine is transformed into an artist book. So if you fulfill this action and draw the mustache on every single person that appears in the magazine, then I think you'd end up with a really wonderful document. I haven't seen the magazine yet, but it's an idea. Lots of this work relies on kind of setting something in motion and just going with the results. So I don't know what the result will be. I don't know how many people will be in the magazine. In a way, it doesn't matter. When we painted the gallery wall with all the leftover paint, I didn't know whether the colour would be brown or yellow. I had no idea what mix would arrive. So it's kind of believing in the idea and the idea allowing the form. The footnote is an invitation to touch the lens of your camera and take a photograph. And this is I have a huge collection of these photographs which have been sent to me, and I display them on my website. And this is just one of those pictures. And this really nice thing happens where when you touch the lens and take the picture, quite often the light that comes through the finger, you get these beautiful kind of glows, orange glows. But that kind of mischievous, I like the trouble of that, because if you touch the lens of your camera, then you leave a greasy fingerprint. So it's not really something you want to do. But by being asked to do that, I think it's, I don't know, I like the problem that it creates. The other thing that was a space awaiting content was, it was the first time that the gallery had sent out an e-flux announcement about the show. So I don't know if people get e-flux, but that's is a common thing. So galleries send out, it's like a database, and this email gets sent to an international audience telling them what's happening in different galleries. But there's a space for an image. So rather than showing an image of an existing work, I created a new work for that space. And thinking about emails, often with the emails that I receive, I get these kind of signatures that remind you not to print the email, or kind of, I guess, ask you to think about whether it's necessary to print it. And this was the first, this little logo that you see with the tree, this was the first email campaign that was kind of green. Do you know, that was the icon for this movement. So, working from that icon, I duplicated it many times to form a pattern. And when you repeat one object and position it next to each other, and then again and again and again, that's called a repeat print. So again, that made me smile. It looks quite dry, but it's a bad joke, really. So, you know, think before printing, and now it's been repeated, like it's a repeat print. So that was the image that was sent out on this email announcement. And then that image then became the artwork from which we made an actual rubber stamp. And this rubber stamp was then used it was inked, and then an entire wall of the gallery was covered in this. So again, it was about think before printing, and it's a repeat print, and it covers the wall. So it's nonsense. gallery rules. Can you read that? Okay. I found out that during the process, the gallery has 2 assistants. Is assistants the right word? Work studies. And it was coming up for renewal. So there was an application process where the gallery was looking for 2 new gallery assistants. And I intervened in that process, and I asked if each applicant could write a list of 10 rules of things which they felt should be enforced in the gallery. And on the wall you can read the contributions that were made. So I've got 2 of them here. I think it's interesting to think about a gallery space and what is and what isn't appropriate. Don't bring ice cream into the gallery. It seems so random, but I guess it's true. Ice cream is not a good thing for in a gallery. They're quite funny, I think, but I'm interested in not any individual list, but kind of all of them together. And if you abided by all of those rules, it would be quite chaotic. There's a lot of contradiction between the lists, but that could have almost been enough just for the show, just to ask the visitors to the show to just follow these rules. Often a rule that's in a gallery is that you can't take pictures. You read that so many times, no photographs. So the footnotes, I made an invitation for people to photograph the signs that ask you not to take photographs. Just because, do you know when you're told as a child not to touch something, the first thing you want to do is touch it. So when you see one of those signs, it's almost, I see it as it just provokes me wanting, I really have to then do that thing that it's asking me not to do. So I pass this invitation to other people, and again I have a huge archive of these photographs which many different people have contributed. So for the show, when thinking about kind of photography in the gallery, there are no signs or no rules. There are rules that some of the gallery, during the application process, I think on some of those it says no photographs. But the intervention is that anybody that's caught taking a photograph in the gallery, if they're being watched on the CCTV at that instant, there will be a screenshot taken of that person. And then that screenshot will then be displayed back in the gallery. And it reminds me, sometimes in London, if you go into like a small grocery store, intervention, I have a text message. Sometimes people that have been caught stealing, subsequently their picture from the CCTV has then been printed out and stuck behind the cashier. So if that person walks into the store again, they'll see themselves, and then maybe they'll think twice before they'll do the same, before they steal again. So here, I like this idea that if you take a picture, you're also photographed, and you also see yourself being taking the picture in the space. So it's that kind of self, like a double loop that starts to occur. I never show this work at all now, but I knew that Gretchen was going to talk about it in her introduction. This is the first Big Brother logo that I made about 10 years ago. When I made this logo, I was interested in making a logo that was invisible. So there are horizontal black lines, and concealed within there is an eye. Almost the more you look for the eye, the less you can see it. But this was the logo that was used on television, on billboards, on everything. And it was about this kind of the idea of surveillance, that it's kind of there but not there. And it's, if you look for it, like it's something that's hidden that you can see when you least expect it. So the work in the show that deals with the documentation of this evening's opening, I kind of reverse. So rather than having a photographer in the gallery picturing us looking at the works, I've presented pictures of the previous openings in the space. So many of you, you'll probably see yourself within the space looking at a previous show. So these are 3 of the pictures. And these photographs are on a cycle. So I think it's interesting to start to notice the people that you are familiar with kind of looking. So you're looking and they're looking, and there's this, again, like a loop or a self-referential kind of circle that happens. And then, again, in all these steps that kind of go in making a show, the work is always documented. And documentation of artwork is always interesting. It's a challenge because quite often, as we saw, the work is on a white wall and sometimes the work is white, and to take a snapshot picture is not possible. You don't get any results. This piece is called Please Do Not Retouch the Artworks, and it's a play on the sign, please do not touch the artworks. Retouch is when something is manipulated on the computer, usually in Photoshop, so something is made better or more real or more perfect than it actually is in real life. So this is a true photograph. So this shows the counterfeit frames. And in the gallery, there's all kinds of problems. So there's a skirting board, there are plug sockets, there are these vents that exist. When documenting work, you have the opportunity to kind of make a perfect environment. The frame is still there, but it's a bit bleached out. But you can see on the skirting board, we can remove all those things which are almost like imperfections or blemishes. So normally this documentation is never seen in the context of the gallery because it kind of reveals a trick. It's like a magician showing the way that something has been done. But for me, it feels like a game, like a spot the difference. So the retouch works are part of the show and are shown in the exit or the entrance. They're not in the galleries, but they're in the kind of the transitional area. And it's really, I really wanted them to be seen in the same kind of viewing experience the actual works are seen. I find it fascinating how those two things kind of coexist, and rather than trying to separate them, forcing them together. I'm getting towards the end. Subject to Change is the official title, or the kind of the printed title for this performative lecture. And I was asked to come up with a title on the 5th of July. That was 74 days ago. I had no idea what even the works I was going to make in the show, so to come up with a title for a lecture felt impossible. So to use Subject to Change, it felt really nice. It became like a placeholder. So when you would read this title on if it was printed in a newspaper or printed on the invitation, it looks like a mistake because it feels like, did they not update it? There's a question. But it also gave me that freedom. It's like having a blank space. If you put that as a title, Subject to Change, then I had the 74 days since that title was printed till today to work with what the lecture would be. It doesn't fix anything. The footnote is, the title is Utilitarian Greeting Card, and it's a small A6 greeting card, and it's called a late card, and on the front there's a sentence that asks the sender of this card to write an excuse of why the card is late. So like the title, it's kind of presuming quite often when we send greeting cards, we're often late. So it's, by writing the excuse and sending the card, it feels, I don't know, it has this like weird double logic that it's okay, it had to be late because the card has late card printed on it, so it's okay, it's acceptable. So subject to change morphed into the subtitle is audio guide, and I talked about it at the beginning, but this presentation is in the same order that the title sheet, so that's why we kind of readdress this again now. The title sheet, which is on the front desk, lists all 18 works which you'll see in that make up the show. And the title sheet is also a work. The footnotes is this idea that the more a ball bounces, the less it bounces. So with the title sheet, we printed out one perfect copy from the printer, and then that copy was taken to the photocopy machine and a copy was made. And the copy that exited the machine was then copied. And we continued this process. So quite quickly, the title sheet degrades, the quality degrades, until we end up with these abstract marks. This work really, I think often, like press releases and title sheets that you see in galleries, they're often not printed out, they're often copies that have been made from a copy, and there's some kind of nice quality with the way that the type is thicker or slightly illegible in certain areas. So this is kind of taking an existing process that tends to happen, but kind of pushing it to an extreme. And I find like the result, if you go through this stack, you can decide as a viewer whether you want that information. Do you want a title sheet? Because it's not necessary to have a title sheet when looking at work. You can, maybe the title sheet gives too much information about the work and you would prefer to have kind of a more interpretive relationship and kind of make your own thoughts of what something is rather than being told. So if that's the case, you can still take a title sheet and just grab one of the ones that's more abstract. And they're all, I don't know, it feels quite almost like a painting or just abstract mark making. I think it's quite beautiful, just this randomness that's occurred. Connected with the title sheet is a set of didactic wall labels. So everything in the gallery space has been captioned. Sorry, everything which is not art. So you'll have seen on some of these photographs, things like those wall vents, or light switches, or radiators, or thermostats, all the things which are kind of the blemishes on this perfect white space, or the empty room. Those things have all been, they're all being pointed to. The footnotes, there are two footnotes. So this analogy of when you point to something, say, look, you don't look at the finger, you look at the direction that the finger's pointing. And these didactic wall captions, I think, function the same way. The things that they point to, they're actually not the work. The work is the fact that these labels occupy, kind of roam around both gallery spaces and in the foyer. And that set of captions is the work. And that set of captions is then listed on the title sheet. So again, it's this like a spinning wheel or a loop. The other picture is, again, it's not displaying properly on the, this is it's a folded greeting card. And the image on the front of the greeting card is an illustration of the greeting card. So I compare this work to like two mirrors when they face each other. So it opens up an infinite space. So if one mirror faces another and you look down, you can kind of see this endless reflection. And by putting an illustration of the actual form that displays that illustration, it has a similar effect. So when you stand this card on a table and you walk around it, the perspective, the actual perspective shifts, but the pictured perspective is fixed. And there's a really weird thing that happens. The photograph fixes it, both of those things, but when you, the object is much more complex, even though it's something very simple. I think it's a difficult thing to understand. These are some photographs of the wall captions in situ. So this wall caption is a caption for the thermostat. The final work is the visitor book. And the footnote is an intervention with the previous visitor book from a previous show. So here there's a pen which is fixed to the table, and the book is loose. And the invitation was for people to pick up the book and write the name by moving the book across the fixed nib of the pen. It was really difficult. And there's a lot of tangents which were really nice. The first time I installed it, I used the standard big biro, and I drilled the hole, put the pen, and it worked. But then half an hour later, it wouldn't work because the ink in the pen had drained to the bottom, and it just wouldn't work. So then the curator that I was working with suggested that I use this pen, which is the NASA space pen. And it was a small pen that cost like $50, really expensive, but it would work in any orientation. It would write underwater, through grease, zero gravity. It was this like perfect object. So we went out, bought this pen, installed it, and sure enough, it worked. And then during this process, someone told me a story where NASA, to develop this pen, I think NASA spent $10 million to develop the pen. So when they went to space, they had an implement which would be guaranteed to work. When the Russians went to space, they took a pencil. So I think it's brilliant. So the visitor book, on the front cover of the visitor book is this invitation. So I took a peek earlier, and I think the process has already begun. So yeah, it'd be nice if everybody could add to this kind of ongoing narrative. And my last thought, and it was a question, I'm going to pose this to Courtney, but the title of this exhibition is The Sequel, and the other day Gretchen was giving me a ride back to my apartment, and we were just talking about sequels and what follows a sequel, and we didn't know the name. Is it triquel, a sequel? But then I thought this led to the idea that it would be a really interesting show to travel. You know, I've made a show in the past where that set of works is then taken to another gallery and shown. But I think this process, to think about how this show might travel, would be really great, because I wouldn't take any of the actual material or things, but it would just be the ideas that would travel. But I think it would be a really exciting thing to think about, maybe part 2 of this show, so the sequel of a sequel. So on that thought, I've finished, and I think we can, unless there's any questions, we can go to the gallery. Thank you.